Hello everyone and welcome to another WebDev lesson. Today we're going to be talking about JavaScript function scopes, and we're going to talk about how to use them and how to think about solving problems when you come across one of these kind of problems. So, before you watch this video, you should do the function review link, which should be below this video. You should see a button that says function review, and that's going to go through pretty much everything we've done up till this point. So if you're a little fuzzy, maybe you want to just kind of get caught up on, what we've done this far. It's only been 2 videos, but we've covered a lot of stuff. So that function review link is right below this video, so I highly encourage you to do that before you watch the rest of this. Okay, without much further ado, let's go ahead and get into some code. Alright, so I'm on the GitHub repo for this lesson, which is the function scope. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead with you and just follow the steps of forking and cloning and all that stuff. So I'm going to assume you've already hit this fork button, so you should no longer see my name here. And what we're going to do now is we are going to clone. So I'm going to copy all this and I'm going to open terminal. And I'm going to cd into my directory, which is WebDev lessons exercises. Not really sure where you'll have that, but eventually you'll get to this folder here, and I'll cd into it. And now, if you look at my present working directory, I am inside of my WebDev lessons exercises folder. So now I'm going to run Git Clone and paste. And as you can see, it is cloning to my machine. And if I do ls, I can cd inside of WebDev function -scope. And so now I'm going to clear this so it's not super confusing, and I'm going to run git status, and you can see it's up to date because we have not changed anything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up that file I'm going to open up that folder rather with Sublime text. So I'm going to open up Sublime, and I'm going to open, and I'm going to find my file. So I'm now inside my WebDev lessons exercises folder, and here is my function scope, and I'm going to hit open. So now you can see all this is here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the README, but I'm going to open it from here because this looks a little bit better. And we're going to use this actually kind of as our lesson for today. So this walks through everything I want to talk about today, which is function scope. So by the end of this lesson, you should know what scoping is and how to use it, right? And most likely it's going to help you solve errors because it's going to cause bugs that you won't understand. So hopefully this lesson will help you understand what those bugs are and how to fix them. So examine this function and make a guess as to what the output would be if this function were invoked. So this is our function, right? Var add 2 and 3 equals a function that creates a variable called 2 and assigns it to the actual number 2. Then it creates a variable called 3 and assigns it to the number 3, right? And then it returns 2, right, plus 3. Pretty simple. If you guessed 5, you were correct. It would return 5. Nothing new here, right? If, however, we decided or tried to run this line of code, it would throw an error. If we tried to do console log 2, right, this is our variable, we created this variable, right? It says 2 is not defined. Why? This would fail because the variable 2 cannot be accessed outside of the add 2 and 3 function. The variable 2 is within the scope of add 2 and 3. If we wanted to be able to access this variable outside of the add 2 and 3 function, we'd need to refactor the code a little bit, and I demonstrate this here. Here we've created our var2 variable outside of the add 2 and 3 function. This is still 3 we're creating inside of here, and this is 2 we're creating outside of here. And when we return 2 plus 3, it will still work. This code will still work and allow us to have access to the variable outside the scope of add 2 and 3. So this line would now work, console log 2. So the variable 2 is in what we call the global scope. This means that 2 is globally available across all of our code. So hopefully that makes some sense, because even if we wrote another function that looked a lot like this, 2 would still be accessible. It would be accessible both to this function, add 2 and 3, and to whatever other function we tried to create. And we can demonstrate this fact later. So that means that 2 is globally available to all of our code. This can be both a help and a hindrance to you as a developer, and we'll get more into this later. For now, just try to avoid creating variables in the global scope as much as possible. There will be times when you'll actually need to do something like this, but use your judgment. It's probably a good idea, if you can avoid it, to not create global variables. Okay? So test your comprehension of function scopes by going through the exercises in functionscope.js. So let's take a look at those real quick. Here's our functionscope.js, and I'm going to make this a little smaller. Using what you learned from the README, hypothesize what would happen in each of the following cases. And I'll make this just even smaller. Okay, if the code will throw an error, run the corresponding function for that problem and pass in true. Otherwise, run the corresponding function for that problem and pass in false. Do not run the code, okay? Run it in your mind instead. So don't try to take this code and debug it and run it somewhere else. Try it in your mind. And obviously what you'll need to do is you'll need to open this .index or this index.html file in your browser, and we can do that real quick. Let me just open my terminal. And if we look at our present working, okay, I'm going to cd into where I was before. Okay, so as you can see, I have now changed my directory into this function scope file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say open index.html, and that will open up my test folder, or rather my test page. And you can see that we have problem 1, problem 2, and problem 3. So in our code, again, here's 1, 2, and 3. So hopefully this makes sense. Put here whether it's true or whether it's false. And like I said up here, if the code will throw an error, run the function and pass in true. So here, if this would throw us an error, we're going to say true. If this would not throw an error, we would say false, and we would put false in here. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense. So for each one of these, if it would throw an error, if this function ran would throw an error, then you would put true. If not, put false. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, I typed in the right answer before, and you see the green check mark, but now the wrong answer is in, and it's just answer, so it's telling you no. All right. So hopefully you understand what the assignment is here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit more time, and we're going to delve a little bit further into function scope. Okay, so to try and explain the concept of scope to you a little bit better, I've created some sample functions, and we're just going to go through some stuff together real quick. So my idea is that I want to create a function that will take in users' information and then grow the plant. And let's say my whole program should do two things. It should get the user's information, and it should grow a plant for me. So this is my grow plant function, right? At the moment, the only thing we have this grow plant function doing is returning and letting us know that our work is being done and our plant is growing and it's soon to be this plant goal and all that stuff, okay? So, and that's good. That's what we're going to leave it at, all right? So what we're going to do is we are going to uncomment this, and we're going to invoke our function, and we're going to pass in our plant type, right? And that's rows. And we're going to pass in our height goal, which is 5 feet, right? And our return takes in our plant type here, and it also takes in our plant height goal. This is something I wanted to talk to you about because you're going to see this in the exercise. This is called template literals, okay? These are backticks, which are different from these, right? They're actually the backticks that are right above tab on your keyboard. It's the grave symbol, but they're the backticks that are on the same key. if you wrap your entire string in backticks, you can do something like this. And this is actually an ES6 feature, which is one of the new versions of JavaScript implemented this really cool, handy feature that allows us to do this. We can write our string, and JavaScript will treat our string the same way. It will respect all of our white spaces. So if we did that and we ran it, we would see that there is no space there, so it does respect our white space, okay? And it treats everything inside like a string until we exit this string-like mode using this $sign and these two curly brackets. That kind of exits the string mode and puts us into like another type of mode where it treats whatever inside of it as a variable, or we could do some math in here. It basically exits and stops treating it like a string until we reach this other curly cube. So what I've done is I've taken this and I've placed in a variable. The other way to do this, and I'm going to go through this real quick because this is a good thing to know because you'll see this in a lot of older code. Thankfully, the newer code is updated and is moving towards something a lot easier. But what you used to see was something like this. It would be here, then it would do a plus symbol, and then it would have this, okay? And this is called concatenation. This is concatenating two things or more together. And it doesn't like this for some reason. Let's see. What is our issue here? So anyways, let me complete this because currently it's not completed. And we'll put another one here. And we'll say plus. And we'll remove this and this. And what did I miss? Oh, I missed another plus sign. There we go. So this will work the exact same way. We'll just need to add a space here, and a space here, and a space, whoops, and a space here, and a space here. And if I run it, you'll see we get the exact same thing using concatenation, which is the old way of doing things. Now, you can see that's a lot of work. So I'm going to put this back and use the new ES6 method, which is using these template literals, or these backticks. And you get the same thing for a lot less work. It's just much easier to work with. So concatenation, the old style, using the plus symbols, stringing, kind of concatenating strings together. That's the old style. This is the new way, which is just template literals. Much, much, much easier. So I recommend you use this whenever you have to use variables in strings. Okay, bit of a rabbit trail there. Let's get back on topic. So we are passing this in, we are growing plant, and when we invoke this grow plant function, boom, it tells us your rose plant is growing and will soon be 5 feet tall. Woohoo! And I looked it up. 5 to 6 feet is good for a rose plant. So we're good to go here. So hopefully this code makes sense. It should by this point. So that's great. We're building it. We're passing in our own manual functions. Well, what if we wanted to somehow get information from the user? Well, to do that, we'd have to build another function that says maybe get plant info, okay? And we would pass in whatever our user is, somehow maybe this will get information from our web page, okay? And the user will pass in this information from the web page, okay? And so now we've kind of separated it. We've created a function that gets the user's information, and then we've created a function that will build it. This is good. This is a good way of doing it. Maybe we'll refactor this later, but for now, let's just use what we've got here. So this is where our function scope comes in. Currently, we've found a way around this, okay? But if we try to set plant type here to equal this, right? Or if we kept this same plant type, it wouldn't be accessible, okay? This code, as it right now, and let me uncomment this, this code would not run. It wouldn't run at all, okay? Or it would run, but it would give us an error because plant type is not defined. Plant type doesn't exist. It's just in this function, okay? One cool thing I wanted to mention, now that we're talking about scopes, I can let you in on a little secret and tell you that these variables that are created as arguments are part of their own scope, which is really cool. Our function will create variables for free for us and give us their own scope, which is really neat. So they're not accessible from the outside of this function. So here's what we're going to do. okay, we are going to create two variables here, plant type and plant height goal. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove these, okay, and that forces these to go back to, and if I highlight it, it actually tells us it's going to go back up to here. So it's going to find our two global variables, okay, that set that value. So now I can remove this, okay, and we're going to run this get plant info, and I'll tell you what we're going to do. After we run this, let's console log. Let's log out our two console log, and let's log out our two things here. So we'll say console log plant type. Great. So now all we're going to do is console log these two after they've been defined. So notice the only place we're passing this in is here, okay? And what we're console logging are these two variables out here. We're not console logging these two, which is what's getting passed in. So we're console logging these two variables. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you're with me. Okay, we'll hit enter, and we get plant type rows, and plant height goal is 5. So we are good. Don't worry about this undefined. That's something else. But we are good there. Oh, it's giving us undefined. I bet you it's giving us undefined because this is a function that hasn't been invoked yet. So if we invoke this function, which we're going to do in a second. So anyways, this console logs properly. We know that our variables are getting assigned the correct data, and that is a great thing. So we're going to comment this console log out because we know it works. And now what we're going to do is we are going to grow plant using these two variables that we know these two variables have the correct data. So we're going to invoke this function using these two datas, or these two variables, and we assigned these two variables their data using our getPlantInfo function. Alright, ready? Let's run it. And it says your rose plant is growing and will soon be 5 feet tall. And look at that. We now have a perfectly working operation, a system that will work well for us, and we're only using two global variables, okay? So the point I wanted to make with this problem was these two global variables are global because they can be shared globally across multiple functions. We could create an infinite amount of functions, and these two variables would still be accessible to every single function. Hopefully that makes sense. These are outside of all these functions' scopes, okay? If we were to create this variable, if we were to say var plant type in here, it would not be accessible to this function. I hope I've made that point clear, that that's how function scope works. Things inside of your function, things inside of if statements, which we'll get into later, but if you see like these curly brackets and we create a variable in here, our plant type, that is not accessible outside of our if statement. In fact, this function would not have access to this function, or to this variable. Okay, bit of a rabbit trail, but I hope I've illustrated my point enough that you'll be able to do those exercises now. Okay, alright everyone, nice work, you made it to the end of the video. That was a pretty long video for us. Hopefully the rest of them are going to be a little shorter, I know. But I wanted to give you enough information so that you wouldn't struggle with those exercises. So what I want you to do now is to, hopefully you've done that function review exercise I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And now what you're going to do is you're going to do yet another exercise. So you should see both of these exercises linked below, okay? And you're going to do the function scope exercise. And there are 3 problems, and I demonstrated how you would go about solving, well, not solving, but I demonstrated how you would go about, inputting your answers and stuff like that. I've updated some of the words in the directions, so maybe it's a little bit more clear now. I say find the variable instead of run the function, which didn't make a lot of sense, sorry. I pushed these exercises out pretty quickly, so I've edited that now. It won't look the same as it did earlier in this video, and that's okay. I think it's more clear now, so you should be able to do that pretty easily. If you have any questions, of course, contact page, contact me, let me know. And so yes, so I think that's all you need to know to be able to do these exercises, and we will see you in the next video.